34th regular meeting of the Medford City Council will come to order. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Council Caviello. Council Falco.
Present.
Council Knight.
Present.
Vice President Lennon Curran.
Present.
Council Marks.
Present.
Council Scarpelli.
Present.
President Del Russo.
Present. 6 members present, 1 absent. Please join us to rise in saluting the flag.
I.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 16-740, offered by Council Carviello. Be it resolved that the Medford City Council send condolences to the family of Leona Greenwood. Leona was a Medford traffic supervisor for 34 years. Her presence and service to our community will be missed. In the absence of Councilor Carviello, Chair recognizes Councilor Scarpelli.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Greenwood family have been part of the Medford community for as long as I can remember. You can see Mrs. Greenwood, she battled through a very difficult disease, and she'd still be out there in the street and making sure our kids are safe. And Bob worked very hard with our youth soccer organization, and I'm sure that his missus was right beside him. So she'll be greatly missed, and send our condolences.
Please join us in a moment of silence. Please rise. I was informed by officials in the city clerk's office that 16-741 was withdrawn by the petitioner, so it is withdrawn without prejudice. On that motion, or on the motion of Council Knight, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion by Councilor Vice President Lennon Curran for suspension of the rules. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion granted. 16-743, offered by Vice President Lennon Curran. Be it resolved that the administration provide the City Council with an update regarding the aircraft noise that is getting worse in our community. Be it further resolved that we receive an update on what has been done, how the administration is making this a priority, and what will continue to be done for the tens of thousands of residents that are negatively affected on a daily basis. And Madam Vice President, if I can point out, we've been just running into some scheduling conflicts with Mr. Attorney Gliona, who's representing the city on the board at Massport. Madam Vice President.
Thank you, President Del Russo. I put this on. It's probably like my 4th or 5th resolution in the last several months with regards to the airport noise. Yes, we have asked Mr. Gliona to come to the council, and I understand he must be busy, and I understand there's meetings that maybe have been postponed. I just still feel that after a few months we should have some sort of update, either from the administration with regards to what the administration has done, or from our representative on the Massport Commission. The problem is one that we've been getting complaints about for, it was a lot last summer, and then this summer it got worse. And then from what I understand, because we have lane 33L that was put in place, which is why we started getting the air traffic over the last couple of years. And from what I understand, Logan used runway 15 for arrivals actually this weekend, so that's a second runway, and all the planes came over Medford, mainly Medford Heights, but it's still affecting 26. Both lanes are affecting 26 to 30,000 residents in Medford, and it seems like Medford really doesn't have a hand at the table. We never have, and I'm really hoping that the new administration will start to get a grasp and get a seat at the table. There's a big meeting coming up on the 18th, and I did email the mayor's office to make sure a representative or 2 or 3 from Medford would be there with a handful of other communities that are facing the same problem. If we don't have a seat at that table, it's only going to get worse. The city or town of Milton is really on top of the issue. They're complaining, and Massport did relocate over the weekend lane 15, which now was coming over Medford. And if that continues on top of the 33L, we're in for nightly noise. I mean, when I hear it, it's every 3 minutes for hours at a time, and I'm starting to hear it every single day or night, and it's really becoming a disturbance. And I'm getting a lot of complaints about it, but we still, I don't think, have enough support. The people need to understand what needs to be done, and nobody's really informing the public on what needs to be done, where we need to complain to, how we get our information, and that's something that this administration has to lead on. We've asked numerous times for updates. I really hope that the mayor and some other representative will be at that meeting on the 18th, and I believe it's in Somerville, but we really need to start taking this extremely seriously before we're the only ones that aren't complaining and we're getting traffic nonstop 24 hours a day. That's my fear, and it's already a nuisance for so many. I mean, creating headaches and anxiety and problems for a number of people that have called and complained to me. So I just really hope that we can get an update. Mr. Gliona has, obviously has never come to the council. I understand that there's possible meeting problems, but we should have some sort of update from at least our administration to say, this is what's going on, this is how we're involved, this is what we're doing, this is the meetings we're going to, this is how we're fighting this is how we're saying to Massport and the FAA, we need some relief, because we really do need some relief. I don't know if there's anybody here in the audience that wants to talk about it, but it's a serious problem. It really is, especially in North Medford and the Heights. So I hope we can get some resolution on that.
Chair recognizes Councilor Falco.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would also just like to state I received a number of calls this weekend as well regarding the airplane noise over the Heights. It's gotten to a point where it's really, it just seems like it's constant, and something needs to be done, but we do need to get some sort of an update from the administration and from our representative at Massport. So I definitely support this resolution. It's something that needs to be looked at. We've been waiting for a while. And if we could, I definitely support the resolution, and it's just something that we need to look at as soon as possible. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Good evening, welcome. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Rodriguez. I live at 281 Park Street, which I created a Facebook tag this weekend called Logan Airport Medford, because the planes are especially loud after the 11 p.m. hour, between 11 and about 11:40. We get planes in about 1 to 1.5 minute intervals. We also get the 6 a.m. wake up. This is probably the 6th day in a row that we've had both those times, as well as during the day times. When I pick my daughter up at school at the Roberts, which is on Park Street as well, conversations often cease as a plane flies overhead quite low. We all look up, see the windows of the plane, some of the kids wave. It's very low, it's very loud, it's intense. My daughter has migraines. She's going back to the doctor in 2 weeks to have her medication increased that they believe was started because of the planes. I'm experiencing headaches and issues. Sleep interruption is serious, and in a prolonged amount of time, it can really lead to health issues. And we need relief. The other towns are rallying and complaining, and we really need a better format than that form online that you fill in and say what time it's loud, and they send you a letter that says, well, there's an airport. That's not really an answer. I would love to find a way to be more vocal and involved in this problem and try to get us some relief. I know other towns have been quite successful, and what we have to do is we have to be the squeaky wheel. We have to be loud, and we have to get some help, and we really have to do it before it gets worse, because as these other communities get help, if we're not there, then they say, you know what, Medford's not here. We'll just fly those extra planes over you, and then that town can get some relief, and we're going to suffer more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, welcome. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, Jean Uzo, 35 Paris Street. I just wanted to come up in support of the request. I would say the situation is progressively getting more dire. There have been times in the past few weeks when it has been so loud, so late at night, it's disrupted sleep. It really is terrible. I know that we've always been a city that the planes have flown over, but I can remember when I was much younger, they flew much higher, and it feels like that band that they're traveling is getting tighter and tighter, and we're getting more and more of it. So I would echo the thoughts that if we do not find a way to become more vocal as a city, we're going to get the majority of the traffic. But it definitely is becoming quite difficult to get a good night's sleep in our neighborhood and in our area. Thank you.
Thank you. On the motion for approval by Vice President Longo-Kern, as seconded by Councilor Falco. All those in favor? A roll call has been requested. Mr. Marks, Councilor.
I want to thank Councilor Longo-Kern for bringing up this important issue. I know Councilor Longo-Kern has brought this up many times, as well as many members behind this railing. And part of my frustration, Mr. President, is the fact that the mayor appoints a person to sit on the advisory board for Massport. And over the years, in my research, the advisory board position, and this excludes the most recent appointment of Attorney Gliona, that appointment in the past never attended meetings at Massport. We asked the previous person that was in that role, again, to appear before the Medford City Council to give us an update. That person, for whatever reason, the appointment of the mayor, refused to come before this council to give us an update on a very important issue in this community. This council has voted 7-0 on at least 3 occasions. I offered 3 separate resolutions to ask Massport to look at the noise detectors that are located throughout the city of Medford, and to see, Mr. President, if they can strategically be relocated in areas that are experiencing this particular additional noise. As we heard, the Heights, South Medford. I live in the Wellington area, and I can tell you this weekend, they were overhead every 3 minutes the same way, very low. So I think it's throughout the entire community. And we asked a simple request, Mr. President, and it's a shame that Massport, for whatever reason, is not considering this community as part of the advisory board, and really has done very little to nothing to address some of the concerns. We even asked for a representative of Massport to appear before this council to answer some of the questions we had, Mr. President. So I'm not sure what it's going to take. You know, I don't think this latest representative that's on the board, although he's a very capable person, he said they have yet to call for a meeting. I'm not sure what insight he can give to this council, but it's about time that the mayor of this community, Mr. President, step up on this issue. This has been an issue for years and years and years in this community. This is nothing new. And, you know, I don't know, Mr. President, maybe we need to circulate a petition. Maybe we need to have, you know, a walk on City Hall to try to discuss this issue. Maybe something needs to happen to move this city in getting involved. I agree with the comments made by my colleagues, to get involved with the dialogue. Other communities are receiving relief in the way of new windows in homes, Mr. President. And I realize their homes in Winthrop and East Boston and directly abutting the airport. But there's other mitigating factors that could be done, Mr. President, to residents of this community that are experiencing noise. You know, if you have a dog next door living to you barking too much, you can call the police department and they'll come out and they'll knock the door and say, please, your dog is being a disturbance, and that's against city ordinance. But you can have, you know, these planes over your head, you know, 300 feet over your head every 3 minutes at 1, 2, 3 in the morning, and that's not a disturbance. It just doesn't make any sense to me, Mr. President. So I would ask that we call for an emergency meeting with the mayor of this community, sit down and discuss this issue and what our plan of attack is to address this with Massport, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On the motion, good evening, welcome. Please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Councilor Del Russo. Andrew Castanetti, Cushing Street, Medford. I just drove in from the house. I started to watch your meeting. Hope I'm not redundant on some of the things I might want to say. This airport noise is becoming problematic to some degree, and to other people on a high elevation, it's even worse, I'm sure. Especially, it seems to me, maybe it's my imagination, but it's pretty quiet some evenings from 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. When it's time to like think about the midnight hour, they seem to kick in, which is very odd. I would think at a midnight hour, even Logan Airport being as busy as it is in the world market, maybe they don't have as many, I would think, flights at that hour. They should be able, I would think common sense, but I'm not that smart, to just fly, or especially take off over the ocean, head east, and then make their turns if they have to. That would be common sense, I would think. As I reiterated in the past, it seems to me when they were proposing to build runway, I believe Brianna mentioned 33L, is that correct? Thank you. I believe that would be the time for us to make our comments to Massport. Although, as I said in the past, unless we had the power of Tip O'Neill, I don't think we're going to be able to tell Massport what to do. Having said all of that, Councilor Marks brought up something, and that's the reason why I drove down here. I believe in East Boston, they're not only giving new windows to homeowners, I believe they're also giving insulation. So I'm not sure who our so-called liaison is and what kind of clout they have on a Massport scene. Maybe at least we can get that perk to try to lessen the noise damage. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. On the motion for approval, seconded, all those, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
With the amendment, Mr. President, that we meet emergency meeting with the mayor?
With the request of the mayor's office to meet with the council in an emergency meeting on this subject matter, as amended by Councilor Marks.
Counsel Cavaliello. Counsel Falco.
Yes.
Counsel Knight.
Yes.
Vice President Longo Kern.
Yes.
Counsel Marks.
Yes.
Counsel Scarpelli.
Yes.
President Del Russo.
Yes, with a vote of 6 in the affirmative, 1 absent, the motion carries. 16-742, offered by Vice President Longo Kern. Be it resolved that the Medford City Council discuss the speeding on South Street and request that the administration install speed humps to deter the heavy speeding of cars and trucks in the interest of public safety. Madam Vice President.
Thank you, President Del Russo. This subject, too, came up at least once in the last three months with regards to South Street. Now, it seems like every week we have an issue on 1 or 2 streets, depending on where we're getting the complaints that coming week. The speeding is an issue. South Street, I've received a number of complaints with regards to the speeding, not only of cars, but also of heavy trucking. And trucking is coming down, banging manholes, waking people up. It's a real problem, and it's something that I think we need to either get some enforcement or some speed bumps. I don't believe we can necessarily do raised crosswalks in all these streets, but we need to do something to deter the traffic, the speeding. They're coming from Winthrop Street, buzzing around the corner there, and just flying. It's a straight shoot, and we're talking 40, 50 plus miles per hour, a number of cars all the time. And there's so many people that cross, at least, especially Walnut and South. Somebody's going to get hurt. So if we could ask that the chief of police put some enforcement in that location, and we also ask for an update from, I believe there was supposed to be a potential island put in, anything to deter the traffic. This is another location that really needs some help, and I know we're doing whatever we can in different locations in Medford. I know the Alston and High is getting some work done. This is another location that, like Highland Ave, like South Street, Main Street, one of our main drags that is creating a serious safety risk. So I really hope that we can request speed bumps on South Street as a council, and deterrent, just a deterrent for the speeding.
Thank you, Councilor. I know a citizen is going to bring the matter before the Traffic Commission in the near future. Chair recognizes Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, thank you very much. I believe that the construction project that the councilor was referring to was not on a traffic island. I think that was determined that it was going to be a curb bump out, would extend the curb at Winthrop and South Street further into the street so that vehicles can't come down Winthrop Street at a high rate of speed going towards the Parkway and continue down South Street at a high rate of speed. And I too would like to request, Mr. President, by way of amendment and update on that construction project. 1021, I sent an email to Deputy Director Director Currens for that exact same purpose, Mr. President. Also, I'd like to request that our traffic division provide directed patrols in the area during the rush hour hours, Mr. President. I think it's safe to say that a lot of this traffic is a direct result of the detour that's being placed on Route 16 that's taking cars out of Medford Square and bringing them down the Parkway, then up Winthrop Street, then back down High Street into Medford Square. Well, if you can go that way, you can also take a left onto Winthrop Street and then a left onto South Street and go down South Street and get into Medford Square that way as well, Mr. President. So we'd also like to ask if the Massachusetts Department of Transportation can provide us with some mitigation help here, Mr. President, maybe in the way of traffic count or traffic study, or helping fund temporary speed bumps in the location. Also, Mr. President, back in April of 2014, I believe the council did support a community improvement initiative which authorized the purchase of 2 mobile speed bumps. One of those mobile speed bumps was placed out on Central for quite a bit of time, and then it was removed. I believe that was part of the pilot program that Councilor Marks championed for raised crosswalks, Mr. President. So I'd also like to request that in the interim, until a permanent solution can be made, that the portable crosswalks that funds are appropriate for in April of 2014 be installed on South Street for the time being, Mr. President. With that, with the directed patrols, I think will have an immediate impact on the quality of life in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Councilor. Good evening. Welcome. Please state your name and address for the record.
I'm Deborah Welch. I live at 102 South Street. And I had 3 pages of notes here, and you just went over 2.5 pages of my notes, and so I appreciate that so much. I would like to share that last Tuesday I did come to this meeting, but last Tuesday before the council meeting, I had another opportunity to speak with Officer Brooks in traffic. And it's just interesting to me how each person that I speak to in different departments within the city are already aware of the speeding issue on South Street. Officer Brooks mentioned the department has a traffic counter. And the counter, it counts the number of vehicles, the number of axles, and the time and speed of the vehicles, which is currently out on a street in Medford. After this street, it goes to Adams Street, then West Street, and then he said it would come onto South Street. And so I just wanted to update that that was the information I had. Also today, there were men on the street marking it out from National Grid, the Greater Boston and New Hampshire Solution, and they were just marking out certain areas, and they are consultants for the Mystic to Woburn Line project for, yes, for running underground cables. And so I'm glad so you know about that. Okay, so I'm just wondering, since they have to dig up the street, South Street being one of them, to run those, then possibly the city could piggyback on that road resurfacing and put the humps in at that time, or actually even to put it into their contract that they had to do it. So the bumps are very different from the humps that you would put in the street. The bumps are much wider. They need a drain. They're very expensive, I've been told. Okay, so you would know that. And the humps are in a series, and they're smaller. They're like the humps that are in front of Stop in the Fellsway, right, in front of Stop and Shop. And there are a series of them. And the reason that there's a series of them is because it maintains the slowing of the speed, rather than you slow down to go over a hump and then you just speed up after you're 10 feet past it. But if you have a series of them, and with the 4 or 5 streets that you have off of South Street, if you put them either before or after the streets, then that would prevent the trucks, the cars from hitting any pockets in the street that make the loud noises, and the trucks from speeding down the entire street. So it's not really about catching them, during a certain time of the day, because it happens all hours of the night, all hours. I mean, in the summertime, it wakes you up. There's just no relief from that in the summertime. And the size of the trucks, that's another issue. I mean, what are the size of the trucks that are allowed on Winthrop Street? And because Winthrop is the only feed into South Street. So what are the size of the trucks that are allowed? Because if you saw the size of trucks that are coming down the street, I don't think that would be allowed. So that is, I appreciate that. And the only other thing I have to say is about, as far as the street humps go, there are only 3 materials that are used for that. And the city already has it. It's asphalt, signage, just alerting them to bumps, or having one of those sticks up there like you do on a fire hydrant, and bright yellow spray paint. It's just 3 materials. Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Chair recognizes Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, Ms. Welch mentioned something that made me think, as we look at South Street and its location, and then we look at right across the river, we have the Fellsway. And the Fellsway is part of our parkway system, and no trucking is allowed on on the Fellsway on Route 16. And I see no difference between Route 16 and the same exact street, South Street, directly across the street, Mr. President. So I'd like to amend the paper and request that the Traffic Commission take a look at the feasibility of making that a no-truck route. No heavy trucking.
No heavy trucking on South Street. Madam Vice President.
I just want to second that, President Del Russo. I believe I've been getting the trucking complaints on South Street for the last couple years since we did no heavy trucking on Harvard. So I think you're getting people, the trucks that can't go on Harvard or, don't think they can go on Harvard coming down south now. And I think maybe that's where the overflow is coming from. So I think making South Street no heavy trucking is a good idea and something that almost the residents need as part of their relief.
Thank you. So on the motion of Vice President Longo-Kern, as seconded and amended by Councilor Knight, Councilor Marks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think it was Councilor Longo-Kern that asked during the budget time that the city purchase more of the electronic speed signs because one of them was not properly working. And now I'm hearing that we have one counter for the entire city. We have hundreds and hundreds of roads, and we have one counter. And there's a list of streets, and your street may get put on the list at some point to have the traffic. It seems to me an invaluable resource to have this particular device count the traffic. It also gives a pretty accurate estimate of the speed cars are going, so you can get a great picture of what's happening on a road. So I would ask, as part of this report, that the administration look into purchasing another counter or possibly two counters for the use of our traffic division. The second point, Mr. President, and as Councilor Knight mentioned, there's a major difference, and I realize what you're trying to do with traffic calming. You're trying to slow down cars on South Street. I am adamantly opposed to any type of speed bump, and there's a reason, not because I don't like speed bumps. They may work in the parking lot. I live across from the Stop and Shop, and they're effective in that parking lot. On streets, let me tell you, if you were to put several speed bumps on South Street, you'd be woken up all times of the night with cars going over that, because just like you're stating with a raised crosswalk, they tend not to slow down. A speed bump is the same thing. And they're going to fly over the speed bump, and you're going to have trucks that are just going to be bouncing off those speed bumps. To me, strategically located raised crosswalks, they're more expensive, but that's what's done in Cambridge, Somerville, Boston, and they're very effective in slowing down traffic, especially if they're properly marked. The one on Winthrop Street, we've had a fight to get marked and so forth, the paint on and so forth. But there are a lot of other traffic calming approaches that of widening sidewalks, of putting 3D markers painted on the street that look like there's an interruption in the street and cars will slow down. There's a number of approaches that can be done that I think speed bumps, I think if you did install them, you'll be asking us to remove them immediately. They're just not effective on main roads. They just don't work. And that's why you don't see them. Go to any other community. Malden ripped up the few that they had because there were a number of accidents caused by the speed bumps and cars trying to stop and going over too fast. But it was my hope with the pilot program with the raised crosswalks, which now is on year 3 or 4. We were promised 3, we only got 1. So it was my hope that eventually, after reviewing these raised crosswalks, that we'd start putting throughout the community in areas that we know we need, and South Street would be one. And I agree, South Street's a long street, cars pick up speed. But if we had a traffic engineer like Councilor Falco has been asking for here at City Hall, we'd be able to strategically locate these raised crosswalks in an area that would, in effect, probably slow down traffic throughout the entire South Street area. And that was my hope. But in my opinion, this city does very little when it comes to pedestrian safety, when it comes to enforcement in the community. And I'm hoping that with this new administration, that the mayor maintains some of the commitments that the past mayor had. One being the crosswalks, the raised crosswalks. That was a commitment from Mayor McGlynn. Mayor McGlynn also promised that crosswalks throughout the city would also get neon pedestrian crossing signs on each side of the street. And when McGlynn left office, the new administration, I offered a resolution, I think it was last week, did not pick up on that. So I'm hoping that becomes part of the overall process of moving this city forward. But I can appreciate South Street. We've talked about, Brianna knows, her parents live on South Street. We've been talking about South Street since I've been on the council. And I don't know why we as a community can't offer some of these traffic calming approaches, sensible ones. It just doesn't make sense to me. Your mic's not on. Wait.
Good evening, welcome.
Hi. It was also mentioned earlier that there might be an island. I had spoken with, at DPW, Mr. Tenaglia, who had told me that he had seen plans for an island. He doesn't know where they are right now, but he said he has seen plans for an island. And then it was also mentioned about the extended sidewalk, so the sidewalks would come out. So I think anything in the beginning, because if you're taking a right-hand turn onto South Street, it says blind driveway. There's a sign that says blind driveway, which means it's like, as it was last week, there was another place in Medford that there was a fence up that it's blind, that you can't get by it. This is a blind turn onto South Street, and literally, I mean, they just fly by. So you don't know when they're coming. I mean, trying to cross the street, whatever. You have people playing softball. You have the little kids coming. You know, the parents are parking there so they can go over to the park. I mean, it's dangerous. It's seriously a danger zone. So I would ask that the beginning of the street really be looked at, how to slow down that traffic coming around the corners, and then continuing down the street. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilor Falco.
Mr. President, just want to thank Councilor Longo-Kern for bringing this forward. I mean, it's a very important resolution. I can identify 100% with going to take my kids to Little League at the park. It's a dangerous area. It's a dangerous intersection. And I support the resolution, especially the update on what was supposed to happen with the island, or the making the making the sidewalks wider in that area to help narrow the streets. I mean, if you walk down South Street, I think especially on the side towards the river, there isn't even a sidewalk there. It's just grass. So I mean, it'd be nice to actually, maybe we could have a sidewalk created to actually help narrow that road. But I really think, you hear something like this here, and more, and I think all councilors have received these phone calls and emails. Traffic, speeding, you talk about heavy trucking and how you eliminate it from one street, but it creates problems on another street. And issues like this here scream for a traffic engineer and hiring a traffic engineer. We do not have one on staff in the city. We have no one qualified to study traffic in this city. There is no one qualified at all to study traffic. And we need someone desperately. Like Council Box mentioned earlier, I had offered a resolution back in the spring. It was not included in the budget. I hope it's included in next year's budget. I'll bring it up again. But we desperately need a traffic engineer to look at issues like this, because these issues are just, with more and more development coming into our city, these issues are just becoming, they're popping up all over our neighborhoods throughout our city. They need to be addressed, and I feel like in many ways they're not being addressed because we don't have a traffic engineer. So I support the resolution and move approval.
On the motion for approval by Vice President Longo-Kern, seconded by Councilor Knight, as amended by Councilors Knight, Falco, and Marks. Chair recognizes Vice President Longo-Kern.
Just briefly, if we could also just further amend it, I think with the amount of speeding complaints we're getting and the questions we have for the police, the chief of police, if we could set up a committee of the whole meeting to just discuss with the mayor and the chief of police what else we can do. I think it's great that we have the Complete Streets grant that's coming, and we're going to improve a number of different locations in the city, but that's only going to do so much for, you know, a small amount of streets. We need to create a better plan on how we can enforce our streets with regards to the speeding in a better manner. I don't think we're doing a good enough job, and I think something needs to be done, whether we need to put more police officers on, get more speed monitors, figure out if, you know, how many are trained to enforce speeding. I know traffic counters are involved, and people are now starting to not only complain about the speeding, but to ask us these questions, and we don't know the answers. I didn't know we only had one traffic counter. We learned in budget time that we only had one speed monitor sign that's broken. We've asked for a second one. I believe they're being purchased, but we don't know the facts and figures, and we don't know, you know, the constraints of our police department and what we need to do to make sure we boost levels in the enforcement of traffic, because people are getting hit, people are getting hurt, and we need to do something. In this community, we need to step up to the plate, all get to the table, and decide how we can proceed in a way that's going to make our streets safer for the children, for the elderly, for anybody who's crossing the street at any given moment. We need to make sure we're doing a better job.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Councilor Marks.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, it was the recommendation was made some 4 or 5 years ago that we merge the off-street parking commission with the traffic commission, and that was done recently, as of I think about 1.5 years ago. Both commissions were merged. I think it's probably about time. As we know, this city is growing, not in land-wise, but population-wise and housing-wise, and the need for increased public safety is evident now more than ever. And I think, you know, and this is no slight on anyone, so if anyone takes it that way, I'm sorry, but the Traffic Commission right now consists of the Chief of Police. I mean, he's running a very busy department, so he sits on the Traffic Commission. You have the Director of Office Community Development. She sits on the Traffic Commission. She's running a very busy community development office, trying to bring in new business throughout this community. You have the head of the DPW Commissioner sits on the Traffic Commission. Very busy running the DPW department. And now we're saying, well, now you'll sit on this committee, and maybe years in the past you get together for an hour or two and discuss some issues, vote on some issues, and then go home. But guess what? In this day and age, I think that job involves much more, Mr. President, much more time and effort. And maybe it's about time we as a community review the Traffic Commission and bring it up to the 21st century, Mr. President. And, you know, we're talking about a traffic engineer. Now, the Traffic Commission doesn't have any engineer they can go to either. So when someone presents an issue to them, they don't have the knowledge and whereabouts to go to a traffic engineer and say, how would this work there? Is this suitable? And so forth. So I think at some point, maybe when we do meet, I know Councilor Longo asked, and I think it was Councilor Knight, that we meet with the administration and so forth. Maybe we have to have that discussion, Mr. President, regarding the Traffic Commission and how we can improve the Traffic Commission. Last week we found out that the mayor appointed the Complete Streets Committee to also be part of, which is separate from the Traffic Commission, be part of pedestrian safety initiatives in this community. And maybe, as I recommended, I think it was last week or the week before, that we come up with truly a citizen advisory board, Mr. President, that sits down and not only makes recommendations, but has teeth to do enforcement when it comes to making sure that things happen. Because right now the Traffic Commission can approve it, but they can only approve it until the DPW goes out and hangs the signs or paints the crosswalks or do their job. And maybe we need one body that has both the legislative ability and the enforcement ability to get things done. And, you know, this is an important issue. And really, Mr. President, we're creating bike lanes in this community, and there's a lot happening. We're a major cut-through into the city of Boston, and we're just not doing enough to make sure our streets are safe and pedestrians feel safe to walk around our city, Mr. President. So I would ask, was that offered in the form of a motion that we meet with the traffic, or I don't want to steal someone's thunder if someone offered it.
It was an amendment to the main motion.
Was that an amendment? Okay, so if that's an amendment made already, then I support that wholeheartedly, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor. The chair recognizes the citizen at the podium. Please state your name and address for the record. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Andrew, Cushion Street, 02155. On the subject of safety and South Street, I'd be remiss not to repeat myself at the last police crime watch meeting that transpired in West Medford last month. So Chief Sacco and the officers and the people that were attended. It seems to me the most dangerous intersection in the whole city is at South Street. But I'm not sure what you're speaking of, but if you continue down South Street, heading east, and you come to the end, as you're approaching the police academy and the police station in front of you, and you're entering onto Main Street, in my opinion, it's the most accident-prone, I'm sure it's even documented, intersection in the entire city. Even beats Wellington, Winthrop Circle. I've been dealing with South Medford for over 40-something years. So my recommendation, not being a safety professional, would be as you enter Main Street, it's right turn only.
Councilor Marks.
And I appreciate Mr. Castanetti bringing that up, because this council has offered a number of initiatives regarding lights, blinking lights, and we were always told that because that's an entrance to a state highway, that is state property at the end. And I believe it was about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when the Department of Transportation came before this council to answer some questions on the rehabbing of the Craddock Bridge. We said, you know what, you're going to be right in the area, you're doing over the Craddock Bridge, why not another 25 yards up the street? We know we have a major concern with South and Main. And at the time, I'll never forget it, the person at the podium said, that's not part of the scope of the project. And it would have been a great time, in my opinion, to address the needs. I mean, they're literally, it's like putting a roof on your house and then, not leaving the windows open, or it just doesn't make any sense. But again, we can ask that through our state delegation, State Rep Donato and Senator Jailer and Representative Barbara, to help us get involved in improving that particular intersection. It's right across from the police station. I mean,
Please, Councilor Marks brought up a point that I recollect exactly that session and the answer. You seem 100% accurate to my recollection. Thank you. And thank you for jumping on this, because it's more than an incredibly dangerous intersection. It's got to be the worst in Andrew's book, period, in the whole city. So Route 38, which is Mystic Ave, no, it's Mystic Ave, I believe, and Main Street has no number, so I don't think that's a state road. Mystic Ave is not there, doesn't start until after the fire station, I believe. So I believe South Street also is a city road, even though it's sort of like an exit off Route 16. So maybe we don't have to deal with no state to put up a right turn only coming off south onto Main. There's so many accidents. I can attest from my own blood having situations there. If it's a right turn only, that means they cannot take a left into Medford Square, where a lot of accidents happened, because they don't stop at the stop sign properly, or they do, and it's just called accidents. Right, and you cannot go straight the way I'm speaking, because if you wanted to go straight, well, you could have stayed on 16. No, it's coming off 16, right? You take the right turn only, yeah, okay, now you end up at the fork of Mystic Ave and Main Street. When you make your U-turn around Mystic Ave, just keep away from the fire station's parking lot, because it's a law. You can't go in there and turn. but where there's a will, there's a way. We could eliminate lots of misery, hardship, hopefully not people end up in wheelchairs, and more people go into the funeral homes. Thank you for listening.
Sorry? Sir. So on the motion, as amended, on the motion of Vice President Longo-Kern, seconded by Councilor Knight, and as amended by Vice President Longo-Kern, Councilors Knight, Marks, and Falco. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Paper in the hand of the clerk, offered by Councilor Marks. Be it resolved that the land and building located on Maple Park Avenue, known as the Hegner Center, be discussed. Councilor Marks, as I'm sure you know, and are proud to announce, it has been returned to the care of the city for $1.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, back in 1991, the city of Medford transferred the property located at 15 Maple Park Ave to the Hegner Center for $1. The Hegner Center is a Massachusetts nonprofit corporation which services individuals with intellectual disabilities. The deed from the city to the Hegner Center contained a provision, and the provision stated, in the event the premise shall no longer be used for nonprofit educational purposes, the premise shall revert to the city of Medford. On October 31st, 2007, the Hegner Center merged with a corporation called Bridgewell. Bridgewell also provides individuals with disabilities and their families services to assist them with rehabilitative and educational treatment services. It was back in November of 2013 that Bridgewell outgrew 15 Maple Park Drive, better known as the Hegner Center, and in November of 2013 they relocated and left the building altogether. So for over 2 years, that building sat vacant, and it was not being used for its intended purpose, which was spelled out in the deed for nonprofit educational purposes. And at that point, the city should have known that that building should have reverted back to the city. And for whatever reason, the city wasn't notified, or the city wasn't doing their due diligence, and the building was just left unattended. So it was sometime after, I believe it was in 2015, that Bridgewell entered and explored an option to sell the property to Ministerial, which is, I believe, a church, which is a nonprofit church. And they entered into a purchase and sale agreement to have Ministerial purchase the property at 15 Maple Park Drive for $650,000. Talk about a windfall. They got it for $1 from the city, and they're entering into an agreement to sell it for $650,000. Now, in March 2016, March 10th, this council received paper 16-310 from the mayor's office, Mayor Burke, and as part of the paper, the mayor asked for the council to approve some language changes to the deed itself, and I believe there were 5 different language changes to the deed, and also stated the purpose of this communication is to inform you that the city, Bridgewell, and Ministerio have entered into a tentative agreement under which the city will receive $125,000 from the proceeds of the sale of 15 Maple Park Ave to resolve any issues arising out of Bridgewell's non-use of the property. And I assume it's since November 2013 when they left the building. So at that time, the mayor approached the council through a paper to this council. This council, in their wisdom, said, wait a minute, Madam Mayor, you know, we may agree on some things and may disagree on others, but it didn't make sense at the time for this council to vote on a building that was owned by the city, was deeded over for a particular purpose of nonprofit disability and rehab usage, to now allow that building to be sold. And the council stood up, 7 councilors stood up and said, you know what, and I remember Mr. Rumley was here at the time, and said, we want the city to reestablish ownership based on Bridgewell's failure to provide notification of its departure from that property in 2013. So based on them leaving, based on the deed that said that it should revert back to the city, this council took the stand. And Mr. Rumley went back with that notice from this council. I'm sure he went back to the mayor, and he started to negotiate with Bridgewell. On March 22nd, 2016, Councilor Caviello offered a resolution that the property revert back to the city and that it also be used for other purposes and possibly turn the building into an art center and so forth. On September 27th, as most recent, I offered a resolution asking Mr. Rumley for an update because we haven't heard anything in months. Today, we received a press release. I received one via email from the administration, and it was great. There was a picture of the mayor with, I assume, a representative from Bridgewell, and the mayor's holding a copy of the new deed and a dollar bill that's attached to the deed showing that Bridgewell sold it back to the city. And the mayor wanted to congratulate all parties, except for the Medford City Council, who started this. But that's, the mayor's prerogative. The mayor can thank whoever she wants. And in my opinion, Mr. President, if it wasn't for this council, and this council standing up and saying, you know what, Madam Mayor, you may think that's the right thing, but we don't feel that's the right thing on behalf of the taxpayers of this community. And we don't feel a property assessed at over $650,000 that we receive $125,000, in my opinion, payoff is not the right thing to do, Mr. President. And I just want to thank each and every one of my colleagues. Mr. President, thank you. Thank you, Councilor Scarpelli, Councilor Longo, Councilor Knight, Councilor Falco, and Councilor Caviello for the leadership, Mr. President, on this issue. And I'm proud to say that building is reverting back to the city. And I'm proud to say, Mr. President, whether we resell it or whether we use it for another purpose, like maybe an art center of the community, or maybe having Medford Arts Council have a home that they don't currently have a home, or maybe we can put a recreation department in there that Councilor Scarpelli is the chairman of and leading that effort. We have a lot of need in this community, Mr. President, and I am ecstatic that we were able to get this building back. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Mr. Rumley, because he's the one that negotiated the deal with Bridgewell. And I want to personally thank Mr. Rumley for his efforts on this, and again, thank the council for their leadership, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Marks. Chair recognizes the citizen at the podium. Good evening. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Robert Penta, 0 Summit Road, Medford, Mass. Former member of this august body. I too would like to commend this council for doing the right thing when this issue was presented before you. And likewise, I'd like to thank Mark Rumley. He's a city solicitor, Councilor Rumley, for doing the work. But the disturbing part about this whole presentation is the fact that the deed originally had its right of reverter. And the right of reverter reverts back to the community if, in fact, the building was not going to be used for the particular purpose for which it was intended. It's nonprofit use, and that would be helping children and adults that had serious problems. Putting that aside, the building sat there for almost 2 years, and the city did nothing to recognize not only was the building not being used, but the fact of the matter is it wasn't being used for its intended purpose. I just find it appalling that the mayor of this community would take it upon herself and send out a press release and not even thank you, the councilors, because if it wasn't for you, the councilors, asking Councilor Rumley to do the research, to prove and to show that that building did belong to the city for a future particular city use, it's just a shame. It's another example of this lack of transparency, and I don't know what it's going to take for this council to wake up and to understand. You people are just being used. You're like a ping pong ball bouncing back. Only when you need it, that's when you're called upon. And then when you finally do something, and it didn't even help any one councilor in particular, you were doing this for the entire community, the community as a whole. And you don't even get a special thank you, you don't even get an acknowledgement, you don't even get a reference by any commentary, but the mayor sends out a press release commending herself for completing this. It's a shame. And I don't know what it's going to take for this council to realize that you do have a voice, you are important. And had not this council taken that 7-0 vote to send it to Mr. Rumley, but rather had the 7 of you decided just to vote for it on that particular night, we wouldn't be where we are today, and we'd be out of a building, we'd be out of the use of the building, and you'd look like very stupid individuals because nobody did their homework. So I thank you, I commend you, I applaud you, and I thank Mr. Rumley as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. On the motion of Councilor Marks that the City Council is congratulated. All those in favor?
And receive a commendation.
And receive a commendation. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Be it resolved, this is offered in the hand of the clerk by Councilor Knight. Be it resolved that the City Administration provide an update on the status of Resolution 16-404. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Resolution 16-404 was a resolution that I filed some months back requesting a list of all the roadways and sidewalks that were dug up or permitted for excavation by our public utilities, Mr. President, and the status thereof, whether or not they've been completed to the City of Medford standards or not, as well as a request for a list of properties that have received permits where the restoration work has not been completed. Also, as many of us are aware, in situations where trees wrap around power lines, the utility is responsible for pruning back the trees that are wrapped up in utility lines, and I asked for a list of locations that the utilities are responsible for in terms of trees growing into power lines, Mr. President. So it's a growing concern about the amount of construction work that's going on in our community here that's being performed by public utilities. If you were going to drive down through the Lawrence Estates, for example, you'd see Traincroft and Crocker Road dug up for 15, 20, 30, 40 feet, Mr. President. Then we get down to the corner of Governor's Ave and Forest Street, and we see some more excavation work being done there. Then you look across the street on Ashcroft, and there's work being done there, Mr. President. There's a tremendous amount of trench work being done by our public utilities, but quite frankly, I don't have the warm and fuzzies when it comes down to the restoration work that's being done, Mr. President. So I'm asking the engineering department to give us a list of these properties and locations, Mr. President. Once I receive the list, I'd like to take a review and then potentially create some criteria to mandate requirements in the permitting process. For example, if the utility comes in to do emergency work, that a fire detail be present. If the utility comes in to work on a roadway like Lawrence Road or like Forest Street, that they have to have a police detail present and a traffic management plan in place that's actually going to make sense and work, Mr. President, because as we see our roads get dug up more and more frequently, we see detours and we see traffic getting routed through neighborhoods and through residential streets, and it's really a quality of life issue, Mr. President, between the traffic when the work is going on and then the shoddy repair work at the end of the job. I think that's something that we need to take a focus on.
Thank you,
I'd ask for
Councilor.
the council to support this resolution.
On the motion for approval by Councilor Knight, seconded by Councilor Falco. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. The records of the meeting. Before we call for the records, Chair recognizes Councilor Marks.
If we could just ask that the crosswalk in front of the Seafood Depot in West Medford Square be painted in the interest of public safety.
On that motion, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries.
And do we have any report of the Committee of the Whole? I know we reported something out.
We have yet to receive that.
Okay.
Chair recognizes Vice President Longo Kern.
Just a brief acknowledgement to the Chamber of Commerce. They branched off. Kelly Catallo and Janet Donnelly ran a women's networking event tonight at Salvatore's restaurant, and I just want to congratulate them. They had almost 40, 50 women there networking. It was a nice event, and I told them I'd give them a shout out. It went really well, and thanked Denise Baker from Sal's who donated all the pizza.
Yum, yum.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And thank you to our city clerk and the staff in the Registrar of Voters Office for undertaking for the first time such a monumentous task of having early voting for now 2 weeks, and with over 5,000 people voting early in the upcoming election. So thank you, Mr. Clerk. Councilor.
I know I had the opportunity to attend the Haynes Square Fall Festival. I want to thank the organizers. They put together a great festival at Haynes Square, and also the West Medford Halloween party that they had behind the liquor spot, Bargain Spot Liquors. And I want to thank the organizers of that event as well. You know, Steve Pompeo and some other members of the community were very active in putting that together. So I want to thank the organizers.
Great weekend in Medford. And Councilor Falco.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I may mention quickly, tomorrow night, November 2nd, is the next community police meeting at St. Francis Parish Center. It starts at 7 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the records are in the hands of Councilor Scarpelli. Did you examine them? How do you find them, sir? On the motion for approval, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motions are approved. On the motion of adjournment by Vice President Longo Kern, all those in favor? And no meeting next week on Election Day. Get out and vote.